Hello everyone, thank you for being here for day number 2 of our bootcamp training. Today we're going to be talking about the seller's disclosure statement, the deposit money notice, the cooperating compensation agreement or co-op letter, the buyer's estimated closing cost, the pre-approval letter, the buyer's financial information form, also known as BFI, how to write a earnest deposit check, and our offer cover letter. Let's start with our seller's property disclosure statement. One thing that you guys should know about this document is it applies to 1 to 4 residential dwellings. So if you have an apartment building that is 5 units or more, it does not apply because at that point it's considered commercial real estate. If you have a mixed-use property where you have a commercial space and 1 or more apartments up to 4, this does apply. But if you have more than 5 or more, it does not apply. So 1 to 4 residential dwellings. It could be mixed use, it could be all residential. Also, there is a bunch of reasons or exclusions as to why this document is not needed in a transaction. Transfer by fiduciary during the administration of a descendant, estate, guardianship, conservatorship, or trust means that if someone is selling their parents' home because their parents died, or their uncle, or someone else, they're not obligated to provide a seller's disclosure statement. Transfers as a result of a court order, well, it's self-explanatory. Transfers to a mortgage lender that result from a buyer's default and subsequent foreclosure sales that result from the default. Well, if somebody loses their home to the bank, they're not obligated to give a seller's disclosure statement to the lender who took their property. Transfers from a co-owner to 1 or more other co-owners. So if someone owns a property with someone else and they're buying their partner out or their business partner, whatever they are, they're not obligated to do so. Transfers made to a spouse or direct descendant. If you're giving your property to your child or you're getting it from your spouse, you don't have to do it. Transfers between spouses as a result of divorce, legal separation, or property settlement. That makes sense, right? Transfers by a corporation, partnership, or other association to its shareholders, partners, or other equity owners as part of a plan of liquidation. So if a corporation owns 100 properties and they're giving it, to their partners or to their members, they don't have to provide this document. Transfers of a property to be demolished or converted to non-residential use. So you have a house that is going to be demolished because they're going to build a garage. It doesn't have to be provided. Transfers of an improved real property. What is unimproved real property? Raw land. Transfers of new construction that has never been occupied and, so this applies to new homes or apartment buildings up to 4 units, but they have never been occupied and they must meet these specifications. The buyer has received a 1-year warranty covering the construction. The building has been inspected for compliance with the applicable building code or, if none, a nationally recognized model building code, and a certificate of occupancy or a certificate of code compliance has been issued for the dwelling. So whenever somebody builds a new home or a new property, if they don't provide the buyer with a seller's disclosure statement, they got to give them a 1-year warranty. The property must not be ever occupied. Also, the building had been inspected by license and inspections, whatever township or city the property is located, and also a certificate, which is an actual document that it states that the property is allowed to be occupied or inhabited and that it meets all the codes. So that's it for you. Common law duty to disclose. Although the provision of the real estate seller disclosure law exclude some transfers from the requirement of completing a disclosure statement, the law does not excuse the seller's common law duty to disclose any known defects, any known material defects of the property in order to avoid fraud, misrepresentation, or deceit in the transaction. This duty continues until the date of settlement. So be careful. The fact that the seller is not obligated to provide a seller's disclosure does not prevent him or her from having to disclose any knowledge of any problems with the property. So you gotta be careful about this. Now, executor, administrator, trustee, signature block. So according to the provisions of the Real Estate Seller Disclosure Law, the undersigned executor, administrator, or trustee is not required to fill out a seller's disclosure statement. The executor, administrator, or trustee must, however, disclose any known material defects of the property. Again, although they're not required to fill it out, they need to let you know or let your client know if there are any known problems with the property. Now, going back to the top of this document. The seller's disclosure is an information document. Okay? So it should be used with care. Why? Because you can rely on the information on the seller's disclosure, but it's not a guarantee. That's why we need to encourage our clients to get a home inspection or any other inspection that is required based on the type of transaction. Okay? Now, also, what is a material defect? A material defect is a problem with a residential real property or any portion of it that will have a significant adverse impact on the value of the property or that involves an unreasonable risk to people on the property. Okay, so this is very important to know because this is what can be used in court against you or your client if you're representing the seller. A material defect is a problem with a residential property or any portion of it that will have a significant impact, adverse impact. That's the key word right there. Adverse impact on the value of the property or that involves an unreasonable risk to people on the property. So first, it must affect the value and be a risk to the people living in the property. So I'm going to give you an example. Your client, a seller, or the seller on the property that you're representing the buyer for, it's giving you the seller's disclosure. And he says that the basement doesn't flood. Then he marks on the document, the basement is dry. And then your client moves in, and a week later, it rains, not very hard, and now the basement has water. Okay, maybe a one-time thing. Then it rains again, and again it gets water. Do you think the seller lied or he didn't lie, or the seller didn't lie by telling on the seller's disclosure that the basement never got water? But now you have 2 times where it didn't rain hard, but there was water in the basement. You got to be careful. Okay? So some sellers like to get away with stuff because they want to bend the reality or the truth. So always recommend to your client to get a home inspection. It's important. It's a way to cover ourselves from any lawsuits or legal problems later on the transaction. So this statement discloses seller's knowledge of the condition of the property as of the date signed by the seller and is not a substitute for any inspection or warranties that buyer may wish to obtain. This statement is not a warranty of any kind by the seller or a warranty or representation by any listing real estate broker, any selling real estate broker, or their licensees. So you got to make your clients aware that you're not responsible for this document because you didn't fill it out, okay? Because that'll show them who has the responsibility. So we are not going to go through every single line item of this because there are things that you should ask the listing agent or a home inspector. But in general, the questions go like this. Seller's expertise. Does the seller possess expertise in contracting, engineering, architecture, environmental assessment, or other areas related to the construction and conditions of the property and its improvement? If your client fits in any of these categories, they need to put yes. Is the seller the landlord for the property? Is the property an investment property or not? Okay? Is the seller a real estate license? Remember, disclose, disclose, disclose. Are you selling your own property as a licensed agent? You need to disclose it. And then you're going to put yes, and you're going to say licensed real estate salesperson in the state of Pennsylvania. Okay? Ownership, occupancy. When was the property most recently occupied? You got to put in there. You got to put at least a month and a year, okay? By how many people? You gotta put how many people were living in the home. Was the seller the most recent occupant? Yes, no. If no, then when did the seller most recently occupy the property? And then the role of the individual completing the disclosure. Is it the owner, the executor, the trustee, an individual holder, partner, or attorney? When was the property acquired? Okay? Now, if you don't know the answer, just put unknown. A lot of clients don't know many technical things about this. For example, when was or where the roof or roofs installed? Do they know when? You got to put an approximate date. Do you have documentation? Yes, no. Now, this is a tricky one. Was the roof or roofs or any portion of it or then replaced or repaired during your ownership? And then if it or they were replaced or repaired, were any existing roofing materials removed? If the owner didn't get up there and fix the roof himself, they're probably not going to know. So it is safe to better say unknown. Don't force or don't push your clients to give an answer if they're not sure. It's better to put unknown. Okay? When the question doesn't apply, just simply mark not applicable. Okay? Sump pumps. Do you guys know what a sump pump pit and a sump pump is? Okay. A sump pump is a system that they install in a basement that gets water. So the pit is where the water goes into. The pump in itself is a pump that goes inside, that when it gets to a certain level of water, then the water gets pumped into the sewer system or outside of the building. So water filtration. Are you aware of any past or present water leakage, accumulation, or dampness within the basement or crawl space? Be careful. Make sure they do tell when, if they got water. Okay? Termites. It's very important. Now, remember, a home inspection is not a destructive or invasive home inspection. The home inspector will be able to test and to inspect any and all areas that are accessible to him or her. Now, if your client buys a property and tears down a wall and finds that the wall had termites, unless there is visible evidence that the termites were visible before, it's going to be a tough thing to sell. But just be careful. So all of these are questions related to the property and the condition of the property and its components, past and present. So make sure you get your clients to answer them. We go to paragraph number 8, additions and alterations. Have any additions, structural changes, or alterations, including remodeling, have been made to the property during your ownership? You got to put down if your client did any repairs. And make sure they put the approximate date and if they got permits or they didn't get permits. Okay? Please make sure of that. It's right here. And it's okay to say you didn't get a permit, because as long as you're letting people know, you're not lying to them. It's their choice if they want to buy your client's property or not, but you need to have disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. Water supply. This is pretty straightforward. Public. Now, if the water supply is public, you don't have to check anything else. When was the water supply last tested? Maybe it was never tested. Just put whatever your client knows. Is the water system shared? Most of the time, it is not shared. You don't share with your neighbor. So this will most likely will be no. Do you have a softener, filter, or other conditioning system? Most of the time, when houses have a filtering system, is because they have well water and they're trying to get the minerals out of it by filtering it. But if you're in the city of Philadelphia or in the surrounding counties, most likely there is no softening or filtering system. But again, these are questions that if they're not answered, you want to get answers. If your drinking water source is not public, is the pumping system in working order? This applies when there is a well. Bypass valve, this does never apply most of the time. It's just a valve that they put to stop the water if something happens. But if you have questions about it, you can ask the listing agent or a plumber or a home inspector. Well, has your well ever run dry? Only applies to well water, okay? And then sewage system. Is the property served by a sewage system? Remember, there are properties that don't have a sewage system. So you got to mark yes, no. When was the sewage system installed? Only if your client knows. Type, public, Philadelphia is public sewer, community, an individual lot sewage disposal, and so on. And then if it's an individual on-lot sewage disposal, then all these questions will apply. If it doesn't, just put NA. Tanks and service, the same thing. Abandoned individual on-lot sewage disposal systems, you gotta ask. Again, ask all these questions and then you'll get the answers. I'm gonna go down to domestic heating. Is it electric? Is it gas? When you walk a property with your client, you should make notes as to what kind of systems there are, because you're not gonna remember everything. Does it have gas or electric heating system? Okay? Does it have breakers or fuses? Some houses still have fuses in their electric system. So you want to know that, so when you list the property, you also have information about it. The heating, so the heating system and the system and the type of system are different. So the heating system is what kind of fuel does it use to work with or on? You got electric, natural gas, fuel oil, and then what kind of system is it? You have hot air heat, like we have here, or you have radiator, and there's also baseboards. So you got to know that, okay? Most of the time, these things here don't apply. Heating system, again, this is all self-explanatory. Fuel tanks, this is important because sometimes houses have oil, fuel, heating systems, and they're going to have a tank. So you got to make sure that this applies, you got to fill it out. So air conditioning system, is it central air? Is it wall units? Is it window units? Are they included in the sale? Electrical system, the same thing here. Is it fuses? Is it circuit breakers? Is it solar powered? What is the amperage? Sometimes you're not going to know and your client is not going to know. So you got to put unknown. Are you aware of any knob and tube wiring in the property? This is a big deal, especially in older homes. Most of the time the owner doesn't know because he just doesn't know. But make sure you ask these questions. And then this one is other equipment and appliances. You want to make sure this is filled out properly as well. This section is intended to identify problems or repairs. And must be completed for each item that will or may be included with the property. Okay? The fact that an item is listed does not mean it is included in the agreement of sale. Remember, you may mark here that you have air conditioners in the window, but if you don't put them on the agreement of sale, the seller is going to take those. So remember that. We talked about it last week. Pool, spas, and tubs. Windows, land and soils. This is very tricky. Usually doesn't happen in our region, in this section of Pennsylvania, but if you go western, they're going to be, where they used to have coal mines, they have what is called mining subsidence. So most of the time this does not apply. Property rights, you can sell your air rights and your mineral rights and your other things, so you want to make sure you mark that. Flooding and drainage. Boundaries, hazardous substances, mold, fungi, all this stuff, they gotta answer that. Radon, if they have a radon system installed, you gotta put that there. Lead paint, tanks, dumping. All right, so this is pretty long when you explain it to your client, but you just gotta make sure you go through it. Additional material defects. Are you aware of any material defects to the property, dwelling, or fixtures which are not disclosed elsewhere in this form? So remember, this is a long questionnaire, but they may know something that is not on this list, they gotta disclose it, okay? Signature and signature. Now, remember that clause that I told you about, that if you want to submit an offer and the seller's disclosure statement is not available, you got to put it on your contract? You always have to make sure you do that, because if your client makes that offer without looking at the seller's disclosure statement and you later on get it and your contract is not contingent on your client reviewing this, and there is something here that your client doesn't like, you're going to be on the hook. So make sure you put that clause on the agreement of sale when you submit that offer without having your client review the seller's disclosure prior or during signing the contract. The agreement of sale is contingent upon the buyer's review and approval. Review first, approval second, of the seller's disclosure statement by, and you put at least 7 days.